All right, let's go ahead and get started. Hello, my name is Heather Chandler, and I am the owner of the Green and Healthy Maine Homes magazines and publisher of the Home and Energy Chats webinar series. And each episode, we chat with industry experts to help you learn about the latest in creating healthy, efficient, and comfortable homes. And I am super excited about our guest today and the topic that we have for you today. In a moment, I will officially introduce them, but I will say that we are so happy to have Amy Eshoo, Naomi Albert, and Rebecca Schultz here with us today to talk about Maine's new plug-in solar law and what it means for all of us. And I believe it's the second in the country. Did I get that right? So pretty amazing that Maine is leading the way once again. So first, I would like to share a special thank you to our annual sponsor, Royal River Heat Pumps. They are a locally owned and operated company that is nationally recognized for heat pump excellence and 100% committed to the highest standards of quality installations, service practices, and customer satisfaction. And you can learn more about them online at royalriverheatpumps.com. Green and Healthy Maine Homes is dedicated to inspiring healthy, efficient, and future-ready Maine homes. And so, in addition to these home and energy chats, we also publish the Green and Healthy Maine Homes magazines. We host the Green Home and Energy Show, which is a large event that takes place every spring in South Portland. And last year, we launched an architectural design awards program called the Green Home and Design Awards, and those take place in the fall. And you can learn more about all of these programs on our website, greenmainehomes.com. And now it is my pleasure to introduce our panelists today. Amy, I'm going to start with you. Amy Eshoo is the director of Maine Climate Action Now. This coalition of 18 grassroots progressive organizations uses the lens of equity in advancing advocacy, education, and community building for climate justice. Amy has been championing clean energy, clean renewable energy for Maine for over a decade through climate activism. And we are so happy to have you with us today. Welcome, Amy. Next up, we have Naomi Albert. Naomi is the manager of community energy planning and policy for a Climate to Thrive organization. Her interest in the intersection of policy, community building, and science drew Naomi to obtain a BS in natural resource planning, and her passion for community-driven climate solutions led her to work with communities in California, Maine, and North Carolina to build momentum for climate resilience and renewable energy. Welcome, Naomi. I've got a tongue twister today. And next up is Rebecca Schultz. Rebecca is Senior Advocate for Climate and Clean Energy at the Natural Resources Council of Maine, where she focuses on utility regulatory policy. She has 20 years of experience in climate, air quality, and electric utility policy, previously working with the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency in its Office of Air and Radiation, the Regulatory Assistance Project, and also the Center for American Progress. Much of her career has been focused internationally, building capacity to reduce emissions in China, where she lived and worked for many years. She holds a master's of environmental science from Yale's School of Forestry, and she moved to Maine in 2007 and lives in Pittsburgh. So welcome, Rebecca. So happy to have you all here with us today. And a reminder that if you are watching and you do have questions you'd like to add for our panelists, please do so using the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen, and we will do our best to get to those after the presentation. We did receive quite a few excellent questions through the registration process, so thank you for those. And now I am going to turn it over to Naomi, who's going to kick us off.
Thanks so much, Heather. We really appreciate the opportunity to be part of this webinar and are very excited that plug-in solar will be coming soon to Maine. A Climate to Thrive was really excited about this because we're very focused on community-driven transition to clean energy, and especially in energy ownership and community members being able to access energy ownership. And so plug-in solar is really exciting because it does expand access to solar ownership. So when we're talking about plug-in solar, these are small portable systems that can be installed into an outdoor outlet. And when I'm saying they're small, they typically would cover about 10 to 15% of a household electricity usage. So in Maine, these systems can be up to 120 watts or less. And because they are small, they have limited interaction with the grid. Most of the electricity that they produce would be consumed in that household by the appliances during the day. And these are already popular in Europe, specifically in Germany, where by the end of 2024, they had more than 780,000 balcony solar systems that were connected. And some estimates are even higher, as many as 4 million installations already in Germany. So it's already something that is popular in Europe. And so when we're talking about the size of these, I think it's helpful to compare to appliances that use a comparable amount of electricity. So as I mentioned, on the smaller end, a plug-in solar system might be 400 watts, and then the largest plug-in solar systems that are allowed are 1,200 watts. And so a 400 watt system would produce an amount of electricity comparable to what a washing machine would use. Or it could run several smaller appliances like a television and a laptop. And then on the larger end of things, a 1,200 watt system might be able to run like an electric space heater, efficient dishwasher, a hair dryer, or a coffee maker. So just a little bit of comparison. And so these systems can significantly reduce barriers to getting solar, in part because they significantly reduce the soft costs associated with solar. So when you're thinking about a traditional rooftop solar system, a significant amount of those costs come from things like utility interconnection, the permitting process, the customer acquisition that those companies need to go through. And because these systems, the plug-in solar systems, are easier to install, and they're smaller and they don't require the same processes, it can significantly reduce the cost. And just to note here that plug-in solar systems, because they do not export a lot of electricity to the grid, most of the electricity is used in the home. They don't need to go through the interconnection process with the electric utility, and that can have unpredictable timelines and can be expensive. And so that's one way that they can make solar more accessible, especially for folks that have had difficulty interconnecting a traditional system. They can also be taken with a household if they move. And so this makes it much more accessible to renters, to folks that don't know how long they're going to stay in their homes, or for folks that can't access traditional financing for solar or just don't have a suitable roof for it. So while these will increase accessibility to solar, I think it's important to also compare what they can do versus a traditional rooftop array. So plug-in solar has significantly lower upfront costs when compared to rooftop solar. But as I mentioned before, they can only produce a fraction of the household's electricity use, so around 10 to 15% of what the household is using as far as electricity. And of course, this would depend on how much electricity your household is using and what size of a plug-in solar system you're getting, whether it's at the 400 watt range or up to 1,200. But when we're looking at the cost, they have the lower upfront cost, and a plug-in solar system would typically pay for itself in savings in just around 3 years based on current costs. Whereas a rooftop solar system has significantly higher upfront costs, a little bit of a higher payback period. But when you're looking at a full 20-year lifespan of a system, could have higher savings overall. And that's because a traditional rooftop system would be able to offset a larger portion of your electricity use and provide greater buffering against rising electricity prices. So I'm just pointing this out just to say that plug-in solar is a really important tool to improve solar accessibility for those that traditional rooftop solar doesn't make sense for, but it's not really a replacement for rooftop solar. And so this gets into a little bit more. So when you're thinking about plug-in solar, this can really make sense for folks, like I mentioned, to rent, who don't have a suitable rooftop for solar, those that can't access financing for solar, or those that don't plan on staying in their home long enough for a traditional rooftop array to pay off. And then rooftop solar would make more sense in most cases for folks that can access that larger amount of financing, have a significant or have a suitable roof, and also planning to stay in their home long enough to see the system pay off. That's just a little bit of an overview as to how it fits in the full solar ownership picture. And with that, I'd like to pass it off to Rebecca, who will cover more about the legislation in Maine. Thank you.
Thanks, Naomi. That was awesome. Hi, my name's Rebecca with NRCM. So what does Maine's new law do? Well, LD 1730 was signed into law on April 6th. And this new law exempts these small portable systems from the interconnection rules that are required for the larger rooftop systems, 10 to 20 times the size, as Naomi mentioned. And that removes a huge regulatory barrier that persists, across the country for these smaller systems. The law also established a number of important safety provisions, which I'll get into, and it excludes these systems from participating in net energy billing, which is the program that larger rooftop systems participate in, and that allows for the accounting of credits for extra solar generation. So with these smaller systems, any energy that is left over after what's consumed on site by the refrigerator and the dehumidifier and the heat pumps and whatever other appliances, that's really considered to be very minimal, well within existing safety margins for the utility equipment, and would be provided to the utility without compensation to the customer. So that's an important distinction. So with respect to the installation requirements, Maine's law distinguishes between smaller and larger systems. So that's systems up to 420 watts. So that could be 1 to 2 panels. And those between 420 and 1200 watts, which could be as many as 6 panels depending on the size. The law prohibits utilities from making customers get approval, pay fees, or install additional equipment. The only interaction with the utility, and that's CMP and Versant, is for these larger systems that exceed 420 watts, where a customer is required to provide notification to the utility within 30 days of installation. And this just allows the utility to monitor the use of plug-in solar equipment within their service territory. Regarding the safety requirements, again, Maine's law distinguishes between smaller and larger systems, so up to 420 and between 420 and 1200 watts. And all units up to 1200 watts must be installed in a way that's consistent with the electrical code for other power generation sources like backup generators. And that's Article 705 of the National Electric Code. For smaller kits, the law does not specifically require that it be installed by a certified electrician. But for most people without technical knowledge of the electric code, like myself, you'd probably want to have an electrician make sure that the wiring is to code to protect your home. For larger systems exceeding 420 watts, between 420 and 1200, the law does require that a customer have the equipment installed by a licensed electrician. And this is just a protective measure given the diversity of electrical wiring across Maine's housing stock. One typical solution, for example, to mitigate risk might be to have a dedicated breaker in the main breaker panel with only one exterior outlet to which the PV system would be plugged in. I am not an electrician, but I will describe that one chief concern that the requirement for an electrician is aiming to address is that the plug-in solar device would be backfeeding into a branch circuit, introducing additional current that could potentially go unprotected by the circuit breaker in the panel board upstream of the solar device. So in the event that you had other appliances plugged in on the same circuit drawing power from the grid, that combined current could exceed the breaker's capacity, but go undetected, and that would pose a risk of fire and shock. So by requiring an electrician for these larger kits, the law seeks to ensure that home wiring is configured to effectively mitigate risks like these. And here I will pass it off to Amy.
Thank you, Rebecca and Naomi. So when is plug-in solar coming to us? I know you can tell by the attendance and how many people signed up. Everyone is excited about this possibility, and we all know how successful it has been in Europe, and we are the second state. But because we are at the head of the pack, only the second state to have this pass into law, and because we ensure that there are these incredible safety features in the law, everyone else isn't quite ready for us. So what was formerly the Underwriters Laboratory, UL, they have started to figure out what the certification process is going to be and what will be required. They've taken some initial steps, but we have to wait until they have all their standards in place. And our hope is that they will have that by the end of 2026. So we have the Maine laws requiring that any of these systems that are used in Maine and installed in Maine are listed or certified in accordance with UL's 3700 certification standards and any future standards. And we're assuming that they are going to refine some of their standards. So there's that kind of wait and see piece that we have. And manufacturers are also undergoing the certification process for the systems that they are creating. So Climate to Thrive has been in direct contact constantly through the crafting of this bill with a manufacturer in Europe about what kind of systems will be produced and are applicable in the United States, because we can't just import systems from Europe. And Maine has a unique piece in its law that we have shut-off times of 0.02 seconds. Now, I think other appliances, the shut-off is 2 seconds. So we're being really, really cautious so that there isn't any backfeed that would harm any of the linesmen who work, especially during like a power outage, and also to protect us in our homes, so that those systems that will have that shutoff time have to be manufactured. And they are going to also have to manufacture to meet the UL code. Right now, you might be on Amazon and say, hey, I see that there's some systems already available, and I'm just going to buy one. This is so exciting. But please be aware those aren't allowed under Maine law because they're not certified to the new safety standards. So we're all excited that this has happened, that we have the law, that we're ahead of the pack, but we also have to sit on our hands for a little while, wait and see, and make sure that the units, the systems that are going to be sold to us meet our safety standards, which is a crucial part of Maine's law to protect both linesmen and ourselves. And then how are we as advocates for plug-in solar, how are we moving forward to work with you so that we can get it to you as fast as possible in the safest way possible? We are following the UL certification process, so we will be on top of when those come out, when it happens. We are talking with the manufacturers. Are they aware of what's going on? Are they aware of our 0.02 shutoff requirement in Maine? Will they have systems that will work for Maine? And then we have learned from manufacturers that one of the pieces that makes the cost so high right now is the delivery of a system to your house. So if you are ordering as an individual, a main part of that $300 to $5,000, depending on the size of the system you're ordering, is from having to deliver it just to you at your house. That if we could organize bulk purchasing programs for Mainers, this will bring down the cost of an individual system. So organizations such as groups that belong to Maine Climate Action Now, like a Climate to Thrive, are talking about how they, as nonprofit organizations can do bulk purchasing for their communities, how we can talk to other local organizations, but also how can we talk to towns? How can we talk to the state? How can we talk to existing agencies about bulk purchasing geographically so that that delivery cost goes down for the manufacturer and our costs then go down for buying that system? We also have begun talks with the electricians union in order to streamline the process of hiring an electrician for the installation. We have required an electrician in our law, and I personally know, I live in North Yarmouth, it's hard to find an electrician and then to get them to come for what basically is a small job when they could be wiring this new subdivision further down the road. So how are we going to help people to make sure that they don't get frustrated and try to do it themselves when we really need an electrician? So we're talking about creating a network that will go along with the bulk purchasing, and we're working with the union to identify where this could happen and how we can have electricians lined up. So we are trying to make this as seamless as possible when the moment comes at the end of the year or the beginning of 2027 for you as a ratepayer and a customer. I think we have put, yes, we've put our names and our email addresses for further questions, but I know we're going to have a chance now with Heather to address questions that were submitted or questions you might have now. But feel free to write down our names. I think, Heather, you might be able to provide them to folks afterwards as well. So we're
Absolutely.
happy to answer questions.
Thank you all for that great overview. And also thank you again for all of your work on this legislation and really everything you did to bring it to Maine and to be so thoughtful about the safety considerations and also all the work you're doing to carry forward. I really appreciate everything you're doing, and we're lucky to have you here in our state. So with that, let's jump into some questions. This one comes from Susan Burnett. She's asking, what will options be for Maine renters in multi-unit buildings without balconies? And Amy, I'm gonna give that one to you.
Sure. So it's kind of like the constraints you'll have for anything when you're renting with a landlord. It is up to the landlord what they will and won't allow on in their building. And because these units need to have an exterior plug and a location where you can install them, most of us don't have balconies in this country. It's not as common a thing, but we do have decks, and we do sometimes have outlets close to your backyard. Maybe you already have another, like an electric mower, or maybe there's something else, and my house has it for my Christmas lights. Um, that you would be able to ask, could I install my one or two panels or more on the deck or in that space between the house and the driveway? But it really is up to the landlord, and also they would need to be able to give you access to for the electrician to put it in the circuit breaker box. So that's my best my best response to how to handle in a multi-unit building.
Thank you. And from your research with the usage in Europe, did you come across any sort of um, adaptations, any sort of product that allows people to run a cord through a window in an insulated way? Do they do anything like that if they don't have an outside outlet?
I don't know of that. I don't know, Naomi, if you all have heard anything from Beth. Um, I think it's required to have the outside outlet, the exterior outlet.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Let's see. I have a question from Christopher Blanchard. He is asking, currently has an existing 6.2 kilowatt solar panel system with battery on his home, and he wants to know if he can plug in solar to supplement that. And so I think Naomi, is that one you can take?
Yeah, so I would say with that, under our law, these systems are not eligible to participate in net energy billing. So that would be the major constraint if you were to plug in a plug-in solar system in addition to having a solar system that is participating in net energy billing. I think it creates a little bit of a gray area how you determine if there's any excess electricity from the plug-in solar that's going into net energy billing. Do you have any additional thoughts on this, Rebecca?
Yeah, I think it's pretty clear by the law that these systems are not eligible for net energy billing. And in the event that you're running it at the same time, there really would be no way to distinguish between, electrons from these small kits and electrons from your roof. So I think according to the letter of the law, they would not be eligible.
Okay, so if you currently have a solar system at your house, direct solar system, you would not be able to take advantage of the plug-in solar.
That's my read, yes.
Okay, all right. This question from Carol Delaney is asking about what's needed from the electrician, and also I guess it's a two-part question. Will it work for summer RVs? Rebecca, is that one that you can take?
Sure. I'm sorry. What was the first part of the question again?
She's asking about what exactly is needed from the electrician. What work is the electrician doing, and then can they use them for summer RVs?
Yeah, so on the second part of the question regarding summer RVs, I believe that RV kits are already on the market, and that's really a different kind of product because this is intended to interface with the electric grid, whereas your RV is independent of the electric grid. So I believe there's already kits that are available that are sort of standalone and may have various configurations where they plug into a battery unit that you can charge your computer and phone off of or otherwise interconnect with the RV systems. So that's really a different product because this is intended to plug into the house to offset demand from the electric grid. And then with respect to the first part of the question, I think we kind of went over that. There are a number of different wiring requirements associated with the smaller and larger units, in part to be determined by the forthcoming UL 3700 standard, and in part defined by the current electric code for interconnecting other power generation sources to the household, like a backup system.
Great. Question from Joan Churchill asking about, will there at some point be a time that it could plug directly into a heat pump?
No. In one word, basically no. Even even if you get the largest size system, what you're doing is offsetting your electricity usage. So that if your heat pump is part of your usage and the sun is shining and you're producing power on your plug-in solar system, yes, that will draw down and reduce your overall usage for that day or that month. But you won't be able to put a specific appliance into one of these systems. It's meant for the whole house usage, not like a one appliance into a plug-in solar. And I think someone else has asked that about like an EV car. This isn't intended to be connected to an appliance, much like Rebecca said, it's not intended for an RV, it's intended for the house's electricity use as a whole.
Okay,
I'll
thank you.
I'll add one thing there is that you can, and this is something that we haven't emphasized so much today, but you can buy these kits in conjunction with a battery. And so you can charge the battery off the solar, and that would be available in the event of an outage and would have sort of power outlets, so you could plug in a computer or a phone or whatever appliances you might want to run in a power outage situation. And so you wouldn't plug in your heat pump to that, but you could run a smaller appliance directly off that backup power source.
Great. Next question's coming in from someone who is identifying himself as an electrician with some PV experience, and he is asking how the devices protect against backfeeding.
So I can take
Rebecca?
that one. Oh, was someone else going to speak?
I was just going to ask if you would take that one.
Well, so I'm not an electrician, and I think backfeeding can have some specific meanings. But in the event that we're talking about backfeeding into the grid, These do not require any kind of control of export. So some of these systems do require an additional piece of equipment to prevent any backfeed to the grid. This does not allow that. So anything beyond what is used on site, behind the meter, as it were, by the household electricity demand would feed back into the utility system for your neighbor to use and whatnot. And that does not have any safety concerns that would exceed the existing safety margins on the utility grid. If we're talking about, so that's what I think that question is about. There are concerns around this. Amy mentioned this anti-islanding requirement. It's an automatic shutoff of 0.2 seconds that's programmed into the inverter in these kits. And that gets triggered anytime there's any disruption in the electrical supply from the grid, so that the system automatically shuts off. And that's to protect line workers in the event that there is a power outage and line workers are working on down lines and they assume there's no electricity on them. Well, if behind a meter there's electricity coming off of one of these solar kits, that would pose a risk to the line workers who had assumed that there was no power on the system. So this is an automatic shutoff that prevents backfeeding in this case in the event of an outage. So
Great.
Two different ways to interpret that question.
Yeah, thank you. Naomi, I'm gonna give you this next one. Someone is asking about homeowners doing the installation themselves. I know that there was a recommendation that I think it might have been Rebecca who said if it was your system, you would have an electrician do it regardless of the size. But in terms of homeowners doing the installation themselves, what are the amps for installing an exterior outlet?
So if going back to what Rebecca had shared during the presentation, it is true that for systems above 420 watts, the law explicitly requires an electrician. For those under that wattage, it needs to be installed in accordance to national electric codes. And for most people, it's helpful to have an electrician unless you have that kind of technical electrical wiring knowledge. As far as the exact amps for the outdoor outlet, I'm not sure about that. I will say that they're designed for like a standard electrical outlet outside. However, as we are awaiting the UL certification, there may be additional specifications that come down through that certification. Did anyone have anything else to add there, Amy or Rebecca?
Since I'm not an electrician either, I know that we just said a standard outdoor outlet is 120 volts. We weren't able to understand the amps of that.
Okay. All right, let's see. What have we not done? Someone is asking about, could you please discuss or recommend certain brands or models of plug-in solar equipment and perhaps local suppliers and servicers? Sounds like we're a little early for that.
It's true. We're a little early, Heather, but we are hoping, and when we're talking with manufacturers and when we're talking amongst ourselves as organizers, to find a home where we could have a list of recommended, like approved in that they meet our safety standards and the certification standards, list of manufacturers so that you could go there and say, oh, okay, I can buy Smith and Jones and I know it'll be ready for Maine and be safe and follow the law in Maine. So we think that would be really helpful, especially as people do buy online if they don't want to be part of the bulk program, they live somewhere where it's not happening. So we're working on finding that home for a list like that. I'm sorry, what was the other part of that question? I think there were two parts. Like local brand,
Also
supplier. Yeah, and
suppliers and
supplier will be the same
servicers.
thing. We're going to try the bulk purchasing, but there will be suppliers if you want to go off on your own and buy it. And we won't know that yet until manufacturers start manufacturing the systems that'll meet Maine standards and the UL certification.
It reminds me of the Efficiency Maine vendor locator resources. And
That's right.
I was going to ask you whether there would be some sort of clearinghouse website where people could find all of this information and
Yes,
have
we
some
are
of these
hoping.
questions answered would be super helpful.
Yes.
So that's the hope, but it hasn't been finalized yet where that's going to
No,
live.
no.
All
Which
right.
literally, I just want to say, like, The bill passed. It had to go through two versions of votes for a technical reason. 4 days later, we had a meeting like, okay, how do we roll this out? That was only, I think, 2 weeks ago. So
Wow.
we are moving as fast as we
Yeah.
can, but we are ahead of the curve, and we just have to acknowledge that Maine is leading, but it also means we're a little too far ahead to actually have the rollout. So we're getting
Yeah.
there.
Yeah. And it was only a month ago, right, that the bill was signed. So it's very early. This question I think relates to a renter. I'm not sure there's anything we can do about that, but they are asking if the homeowner needs to allow the installation of some kind of connection, what happens if they don't allow it? So I'm assuming that means your landlord.
Yeah, I think it's the same question we answered before about multi-units. It's talking with your landlord if you're a renter that you are going to have to work together, and they may be interested. It will also depend, like, is your utility bill part of that you pay them, or do you pay it separately? Are they progressive and they've already installed heat pumps and they're interested in what you're bringing, the knowledge you're bringing, or maybe they already have outdoor outlets and there's room for these. It might look easy to them if you're paying for the electrician. It really will be a case by case, and you'll have to deal with
Mm.
your landlord. Yeah,
And maybe once we have
and,
some positive case studies to share, it might make
right.
landlords feel more comfortable.
Right. And I know that we were talking to a colleague who lives in an HOA, and she's like, I can't even put Christmas lights on I have a balcony, and we're not allowed to have anything out there. So I'm not sure how I'm going to deal with the homeowners association about wanting to have plug-in solar when the time comes. It's
Mm.
another like
Education.
unforeseen, yes, another unforeseen moment. And yes, hopefully education will bring folks around to understand, yes, we have to have, I'll call it infrastructure, but
Mm.
appliances in order to
Hmm.
electrify our lives. It's going to
Hmm.
happen.
Well, it is nice that we have some folks who've had success for a number of years ahead of us in Europe that we can pull from. And, maybe there are some resources there for landlords as well that could be adopted here.
I was just going to add on that very note that it wasn't until 2024, I believe, when Germany passed an additional law clarifying that landlords couldn't prevent renters from installing these systems, that it really began to take off. So
Hmm.
that additional change to the law, and once we have a proof of concept and these are widely deployed and we see costs coming down, you can imagine it being not too heavy a lift to go back and get those kinds of changes to the law.
Yeah, makes sense. Okay, let's see where I was on this list of questions here. Nanny Kennedy is asking she's asking about backfeed, but specifically with the use of a um, generator. So use of either Generac or plug-in for an off-grid application. So can you talk about off-grid applications?
Yeah, and again, I don't feel like people use these terms in different ways, so it's hard to know exactly what the question is getting at. But in the event that you are, you're a if you're off grid, you can do what you want, right? And these systems are not interfacing with the grid at all. But if there's a power outage and you are experiencing a blackout, these systems on their own, because of this programming in the inverter that I described, would automatically shut off within 0.2 seconds in order to protect line workers. So they would not be available to a home, to a customer in the event of an outage, unless you had it equipped with a battery, with a accompanying battery. That battery would still be there for you to plug in a couple appliances too. But you can, and this is specified in the section of the National Electric Code that I mentioned, 705, which is referred to in the law. You can wire things with a transfer switch, which is how backup generators are typically wired, so that you can disconnect your house and retain that electrical demand within your house, and use the systems in that way. But that would be a decision that you make when you're wiring your house to install this.
Hmm. Okay. Someone is asking, is it possible to hang the panels on the side of your house? They said their roof doesn't face the right direction. Um, but hanging on the south side is possible. They have heard that roof panels can get hot and melt siding. Is there a similar issue with these types of panels?
I don't know the answer to that. I'm assuming there are homeowners, so changing, the structure of the house isn't an issue, but I don't know about the safety of having them permanently against siding. I don't know if anyone else knows.
I don't know either, and I would just say that just for someone considering that approach, just be cautious and thinking about like wind, et cetera, and ensuring that I think the majority of these systems we've seen on like a balcony, a deck, or in a yard, and that's kind of the way that they're intended to be used, and haven't heard of that type of an application.
All right. Um, this question comes in from Gina Rocks, and it sounds like she has her garage on a separate system, and this is where she charges her EV. So she's wondering if it could be put out there, even if the EV charger is the only other appliance in the garage.
Yeah, again, I think it would depend on the size of the kit, and the complexity of the wiring, where you're trying to connect it to the system. So if you did have a number of different appliances on one circuit, you could face potential safety risks, in the event of a larger application.
Mm,
I would
okay.
also just add that if you're installing it somewhere where it's only intended to power your EV charger, you need to think about what time of day you're charging your
Mm,
EV. Otherwise, you'd probably want to pair it like with a battery there so that like if you're charging your EV at night.
right. Good point. This is a great question. Can you use this if you also have community solar? I think that's totally separate system. It's just credit, so it wouldn't be a conflict with a community solar. Is that correct?
You'd think so. But
Hmm.
the law prohibits community solar and other NEB. It's a complexity with respect to the utility accounting.
Oh, interesting. So if you have no direct solar on site, but you do have a subscription to community solar and you're getting credits on your bill for that, you wouldn't be able to take advantage of the plug-in.
Yeah, it's just a
Hmm.
straight up prohibition for this, for NEB participants. So if you
Hmm. Okay.
participate as community solar or rooftop solar, either is prohibited under this law. And that's again to sort of streamline the regulatory process for customers interested in using these kits.
Hmm. Okay. We've talked a little bit about placement. So this question is asking if there are recommendations around placement. Um, so anything else you want to say about that? You did say that decks and yards and patios tend to be good spaces. Any other
I,
tips for
my
placement?
my understanding is that you can there's something way to stand them up in a backyard. So I think that's part of that question. So hopefully the ones that we will see here, you'd be able to do that. If you don't have a deck to hang it on, you'd be able to stand it. So in that way, it's a standalone unit if that's what the questionnaire is asking.
Okay. There was a question about resources available for tenants to convince landlords. We've talked about that. Sounds like that's the hope that we'll get some information there. Um, I think we have come to the end. Let me just see if any others have just come in. Um, Sam Zuckerman from Maine Solar Solutions says that Maine Solar intends to stock for pickup or delivery the plug-in kits. So that's another nice resource for some bulk purchasing, removing that delivery fee, and also be offering installation services. So that's really nice to hear. Thanks for adding that, Sam. Um, I think I got to all of them that either directly asked or I think they were covered in the presentations. But are there any final remarks that anyone would like to share?
I love the last question that just popped up. What is the goal of the program? And I
Okay.
think, Naomi, you really kicked it off with what our hopes were for bringing plug-in solar to Maine. Do you want to just review that for folks again? Give it the round off.
Sure. Just to say that the hope for this is to increase accessibility for solar for folks that traditionally have not been able to access solar ownership. And so I think that's what's really exciting about it. And as we've described here, there's a lot still being determined because the systems are currently going through the certification process, and we don't yet have the certified systems available in Maine. But we're also working to ensure that when they are available, that as communities we can come together and make this as accessible as possible. And as Amy had pointed to, we want to be doing things like the bulk purchasing to bring the costs down and also streamlining the process for folks to get access to an electrician. Um, and so I would just say keep engaged too, just to see, stay updated as we continue thinking through that process. One thing I will mention is that if you are involved in like a community group in your own community that's interested in doing like energy work through a Climate to Thrive and our local Leads the Way program, that program is designed to help communities understand models for doing their own energy transition. And as part of that, we're hoping to share more resources around how communities can undertake a bulk purchasing program. And we're working with Amy and others on that. And so just encourage you to stay engaged in that. And if that is something that you're interested in, feel free to reach out as well. And we'll make sure to keep you updated.
I
Great. Thank
also
you.
think, Naomi, we're also thinking this is a chance for individuals who haven't been able to access other forms of generation to kind of empower you to take hold of producing your own energy, right? Even if it's this smaller scale, it's really important that we start to understand what it means in terms of how much energy we use, and that if you do buy a plug-in solar system and start to work with it, you're going to watch your bill move down by X small percent, but a percent. And you're also going to know when your biggest time, what that's called the load, when are you using the most appliances? And when are you getting that spike? And when is your plug-in solar able to help reduce that? Are you drying your hair every morning? Are you leaving your TV on all day when you're not home? You're going to start to understand through your behavior what your electricity demand is and how you can control it in a small way with this system. And
Mm.
I think that's important in terms of how we are looking at our futures and the electrification of our lives and how we're going to supply that energy with clean, renewable energy. So I love that this is also will allow me to take part in that and also to learn from it. And I think that's a beautiful moment with this, where we not only are making it accessible, but there's a reason what we can all take away from it as well.
Yeah, thank you. That knowledge is power, and the more we know, the more we can make better decisions. And so I really do appreciate all of your input and sharing everything you've done and your time today. So thank you for being with us. And thank you again to our sponsor, Royal River Heat Pumps, and to Maggie Perkins, our webinar coordinator, who's been handling everything so beautifully behind the scenes. Thank you, Maggie. You can learn about future home and energy chats and catch up on recordings from our past chats on our website, greenmainhomes.com. And I know that you do watch them. We just got a subscription that came in today, and they said they learned about us from a webinar recording from 2021. So we know that they keep on, they have a life of their own after today. If you have questions that we didn't get to today, our panelists have all graciously offered to have you follow up with them directly, and we will share that contact information again in our follow-up email. Lastly, there will be a short survey that pops up at the end of the session, and we'd love to hear your feedback on today's session and any additional topics you'd like to see in the future. It's always helpful to help us meet your needs. So please keep an eye out for that. And once again, thank you so much and hope you all enjoy this beautiful sunny day.
Thank you for having us, Heather and Maggie. We really appreciate it.
Take
Thank
care. Thank
you.
you.